Hi everyone, and welcome to this live parent workshop on Friday, the 20th of January. Today, we're going to be talking all about maths anxiety in our children, in our students. We're mainly going to be focusing on why your child might feel anxious about their mathematics, how you can build your child's confidence with their maths, and what you can do to support your child with their maths exams and their tests. Hi to everyone who's joined us live, and welcome to everyone who's also watching on the various recordings. Let's get going. So, as I said, today we are really focusing on maths anxiety in our students. Now, maths anxiety is a massive factor in how our students feel and how our children feel about maths, and it can have impacts on how they actually do in that topic. Now, maths anxiety is something we can probably all relate to in certain ways. Either we've experienced, or we've seen people experiences, or we've noticed other people experiences. So that's the focus of today's workshop. So these are the topics we're going to be covering. Let's get into it. So why do students feel anxious about their maths? Now, there are a variety of reasons that students feel anxious about their maths, and those reasons are also applied to us as adults and to people we know from all areas of life. We know someone who feels anxious about maths, and we hear those phrases to do with maths anxiety all the time. So we're going to be focused on we're going to be focusing on why do our students and why do our children feel anxious about their maths. So maths anxiety at its core is an emotional reaction to maths. I stress the word emotional. It is a negative emotional reaction to maths. And the research suggests that it comes from students, in essence, finding maths harder than others. This leads to a lack of confidence, which then leads to a negative emotional reaction. And that cycle that keeps going on causes maths anxiety. I go back to that bit there of it's a negative emotional reaction that causes the maths anxiety. So that emotional reaction is the thing that we want to try and help our children overcome with their mathematics. So we're not just trying to help them overcome the barriers with maths with kind of actually doing the mathematics. It's about their feelings and their interaction with maths as a subject and as an emotional reaction with that maths. Interestingly, the research shows that girls are more likely to feel anxious about maths. There's a lot of studies about why this is the case. And in essence, it comes down to the fact that as a society, we're built towards kind of our male students going on to study maths and sciences historically. And therefore, our female students maybe not seeing that as a pathway for them. And therefore, the connotations come back that maths isn't for them. They have that emotional reactions with maths. And that's why girls tend to feel more anxious about maths. Again, these are kind of historical trends that I'm sure you can kind of appreciate. What I found was really interesting about maths anxiety, and I always find interesting about maths anxiety, is it continues to develop over time. It's not a point. It's not, I have no maths anxiety, I now have maths anxiety. It's something that develops over time. So it might start with something small and then continue to grow. It might be we've had a poor moment in our maths, which has caused a negative emotional reaction. That leads to a lack of confidence, which leads to a lack of motivation and a lack of achievement, which we'll come back and talk about. And that develops over time. But the real thing I really want to put over to you is about it being an emotional reaction. So everything we're talking about when we're helping our students and children overcome their maths anxiety is overcoming that negative emotional reaction to the maths. I also want to talk about, as parents, our own maths anxiety. Now, different parents are going to have different levels of maths anxiety. I'm a maths tutor. I've taught maths for years. And I still sometimes get maths anxiety to do with certain area of maths. Maybe I'm studying something for someone at university, and I might have an emotional reaction towards it, and I'll still feel a bit anxious. So maths anxiety is not just something that we either feel or we don't feel. It's we can feel at different points in time. Now, parents' own maths anxiety may, I stress the word may link to a decrease in performance in our children's ability to complete tasks on maths. And if you think about that kind of logically, it kind of makes some kind of sense, because what's going on, if we display negative emotion towards maths, our children are more likely to pick up on that. We'll come on to the language of mathematics a bit later on, and that can impact on the task being completed at home. So what you need to do as a parent is you need to take a moment to consider your own feelings towards maths and how that might have an impact on your child. So just take a moment right now, just pause and think about your own feelings towards maths. So I think it's really important to just take that moment as we've done there to think about our own feelings for maths, because what we need to do is we need to acknowledge those feelings. There's no point here saying, if you do feel anxious about maths, pretending you don't feel anxious about maths and just ignoring that. You need to make a conscious acknowledgement of that feeling, and then you can make actions, you can do things to make an effort to not display them to your child, or to limit those displays to your child. And we'll come on to things you can do about that. But the point I want to make right now is, as parents, your own maths anxiety may have an impact upon your child's maths anxiety. And therefore, it's really important to consider how you feel about maths before we start thinking about how to purely overcome your child's anxiety towards mathematics. I'm going to take a moment here to talk about one of my absolute key bits to do with maths. I talk about with all the students I work with, all the parents I work with, when I work with teachers I talk to: motivation and achievement. Now, historically, we believed that motivation led to achievement. So we believed that if our children were motivated to do maths, if our students were motivated to do maths, they would achieve better. And that comes from a historical study that kind of looked at students' motivation, their achievement, and the link between them. Now, what happened in that study is we got that link essentially incorrect. We got them the wrong way around. What we have since found out in further studies is it's actually the achievement that leads to an increase in motivation. So you achieve something in maths, and that makes you feeling more motivated to do more with your mathematics. If you think about that really logically, strip it all back to what it's called, makes absolute sense. If you do well at something, you're motivated to do more of it. And that's what it comes down to maths. So when we talk about later on how to tackle our students' maths anxiety, I think it's really important to acknowledge that is the achievement that leads to the motivation. So if we can bring achievement into mathematics, we are going to cause motivation in our children and our students. So it's a really key thing to remember. So from that, we want to give opportunities for our child to achieve. We want to give them moments in their math studies, moments to achieve. So if a child brings some homework home and it's maths, let's make sure we start with a question they can achieve, they can get right. If we take it even further on, say your child is studying their maths GCSE this year, as lots of students are, one real thing that you can do to make an improvement when they sit their exam is tell them to sit the exam with a question they are confident they can get right. So if they open and look at question 1 and they're not sure, go to question 2. Let's get that sense of achievement straight on. Oh, I can get this right. I know I can do this. I can get that achievement. And then we are more motivated to keep going. And that's going to see us through the exam. So this is all come back to achievement comes first. So let's celebrate the achievement first. So now we move on into the real question you're probably asking is, what can I do to support my child? How can I keep helping my child learn? Number one thing you can do is you can have high expectations of them and their mathematics. We know that having high hopes and aspirations for your child has the biggest impact on their outcomes. As a single thing, that is the thing that makes the biggest impact to your child, is you having high hopes and aspirations for them. we have found that the perception that parents have of their child has an influence on how successful your child think they can be. So if we kind of combine those 2 points and we bring it in with what we now know about maths anxiety, if we give the perception that our child is going to have struggles with maths, that they're not going to achieve, then that is going to cause our child to think they can't achieve. That's going to demotivate them. It's also going to cause them to develop that negative emotional reaction to maths. That's going to cause them maths anxiety, which means they're less likely to give stuff a go in the future, which means they're less likely to achieve, which means they're less likely to motivate, and then we're in that cycle. And that's what happens with maths anxiety. We feel anxious about it, so we don't do it. And because we don't do it, we don't get better at it. And because we don't achieve, we're not motivated to keep working at it. You can see how all those things are linked. So this is where we want to nip that in the bud at point 1. Let's get a positive perception of maths, and let's get a positive expectation of our child's relationship with maths. This is not about you sitting down with your child and saying, you are going to get X grade in your SAT. You're going to get this grade in your next test. You're going to get a 9 in your GCSE. You will sit A-level maths. That's not what this is about. This is about having high hopes and aspirations. So no matter what your child's grade is, well, how can we do better? How can we do a bit better next time? If they say, oh, I think I'm going to do badly. No, look, you can do this. We're going to have that positive thoughts. We're going to turn that negative emotional reaction to maths. We're going to try and switch that to a positive emotional reaction with maths. That positivity is going to lead to so much because it is going to cause us to want to do more maths. And that practice is actually where getting better at maths comes from. I also emphasize the last point I wrote here. Sometimes what happens when we want to support our child at home with their homework, for example, is we take over. We start doing the questions for them and they just kind of sit there passively listening or passively just in the room. We want to offer support. We want to offer our child support in how they can improve in maths, but we don't want to take away their independence of actually being able to do it. So I'm just going to change. One of my lights there was right in my eye. Yeah. Sorry for that. Sorry if you're watching that live, especially Fatima. I know you're watching live, Fatima. So we need to help support them, but we don't want to take away that pure independence. And what I mean by that is we can support them with the overall sit in maths. We'll come on to this. Again, it's something I've covered in other workshops. So we can provide a good area of work, focused workspace. We can provide a desk, a table, a quiet area. We can provide the calculator, the water, the pens and pencils. So that's not a barrier to us entering the learning. But what we're not going to do is do the questions for them. We can offer support. So, what do you think about that? If you're helping your child with maths that you can do, well, give them a little bit of information or help them think about where they can go and find that information. Do you want to get out your book and have a look? Do you want to look at this offline maths videos that we know our schools provided? Do we want to go to these websites that I know have been shared by Arthur and other people? So offering that support, but we're not taking away that independence, because if we take away that independence, we're not allowing the student to actually get better at maths. We're just hoping they're going to get better because we're doing it for them. So support, but don't take over. The language is really key here with how we talk about maths. I've written some phrases there that we've all said. I've heard this all the time. Oh, I wasn't good at maths. I wasn't good at maths at school. I never really used it in real life. I can't believe you're doing maths homework again. Just get it done. Just get that maths homework done. I know it's rubbish. I know it's horrible. I know you don't want to do it, but let's get it done. Now, that might be things we feel. That might be things we want to say. But if we're saying those phrases, we are re-emphasizing that negative emotional reaction to maths. We are showing our students that this emotional reaction to maths they are having, this negative emotional reaction to maths they're having, is justified. You are allowed to feel bad about maths because I don't like maths. And we know our children, they do listen to what we say. We know that our aspirations, our feelings, our perceptions has an impact on them. Even when we don't think it does, it does. So we need to get rid of those phrases. You need to get rid of that mindset that you have negative emotional reaction about maths, because if you display those negative emotional reactions, you're more likely to pass them on. Let's give you some other phrases to use. The one I really like is, you can't do this, but you're going to be able to do it. You are going to get better at this. We're not saying you're going to be the best at this ever. Don't worry, you'll definitely get this question right. But you know what? If you keep working, you are going to get better at this subject. If you think about this in terms of sport, if your child was coming home from football and they said, I didn't do a good pass today, you wouldn't say, do you know what? I was never good at passing. Just give up. Just passing's not for everyone. Just stop doing it. No, you can say, let's go practice. Let's do this. When your child's learning to swim, you don't say, well, you're never going to need swimming in real life. Just don't worry about it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. No, say, well, you can't swim, but you're going to be able to do it. Yeah. The reason I say this is my 4-year-old is currently having swimming lessons. I'm very much in this mindset. So it's about flipping it. Well, this is a good challenge. This homework is difficult. It's a good challenge. I really like that this homework is challenging you to get better. It'd be awful if this homework was boring. You could just do it really quickly. If you can get every single question straight away in your maths homework, worksheet, revision, it's not right. It's not the right one. So well done for selecting good revision material that is challenging you. I like the fact that you are finding this difficult. Let's see how I can support you. Like, are there some videos? Do we need to go and talk to your maths teacher? Is it worth putting on something on the Arthur's Facebook group? Is it worth me emailing Arthur? Is it worth me going onto his website? There's all these things we can do. But this comes back to what we spoke about at the start of this workshop. You need to acknowledge your own feelings about maths. If you acknowledge your own feelings, you'll hear these phrases, you either saying them or about to say them, and you'll be able to nip it in the bud. And it's much easier to stop yourself doing something that you have acknowledged you are likely to do. It's about building that habit. So if you hear yourself saying, oh no, maths, make a note. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry I said that. I wasn't good at maths. I shouldn't have said that. That's not true. I actually was really good at these area maths. I actually found this bit of maths fit. I did find it tricky and challenging. Slightly different words. The phrase, I never need this in real life, is something that all maths teachers right now will be going, yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that so many times. There's different ways to answer this. There's loads of different ways to answer this. If your child is about to sit an exam, I just kind of acknowledge the fact that, are you ever going to need trigonometry in real life? It is unlikely that you are ever going to sit down with your calculator and work out sine 53. Like, that doesn't really happen. But you're going to need these skills. You need to understand why you're doing it. I come back to history. When students say, oh, I'm never going to need to know this history in real life, but the skills you are developing help you. There's a quote from an educational book called Cleverlands that says, maths, we teach problem solving through maths. We don't teach maths through problem solving. So maths is allowing us to learn the art, the skill of solving problems. And maths is just one of the processes, the procedures, the methods, the skills, the paths we have to solve those problems. So when am I going to need this in real life? Well, you might not need this exact process formula in real life, but this skill you are developing is going to help you. Are you ever going to be in a situation where you know something, you don't know something, and you want to bridge that gap? Well, that's maths. That at its core is maths, using rules, processes, methods to help us make those jumps. Little things that you can do at home to really help your child with their maths anxiety are these little and often practicing sessions of maths. So one thing you can do at home to help your child with their maths anxiety is to practice maths little and often. Those little and often practices will make a big difference in how they are feeling about maths. It will normalize maths. It will start to get rid of those negative emotional reactions. Practicing those little things. So it might be in year 5, we're doing some long division. It might be higher up, we're doing some factorizing of quadratics. It might be at A level, we're working with our Subat equations. The little practicing of those The little achievement you get from getting those right, when you go into your class or your next revision session or your next online tutoring session, whatever, you've got those skills that you know you can do banked. And that's going to allow you to push on and achieve more. So keep practicing maths when you can. Use the maths language we've talked about to create a positive atmosphere around maths. Acknowledge your own feelings and consider how you can display those feelings in a positive light. This might be for some of you as parents, we all have things we are anxious about. I'm very self-conscious about my spelling. I'm very self-conscious about not teaching people to spell bad. Awful grammar there. I'm very conscious about this. So I have to make a real perception around my children to not say I am bad at spelling. I try and change my mindset, or at least try and change how I'm verbalizing that mindset. I think it's really important, finally, to listen to your child about their maths anxiety. It is really easy to kind of just disregard that. Just say, but I'm going to ignore your feelings. This is what we need to do. You need to listen to your child. If they're saying they are feeling these ways about maths, acknowledge those feelings and talk about how you can overcome them. So if they're saying, I'm feeling really anxious every time I walk into my maths lesson, let's try and think about, why are they feeling anxious? Are they feeling anxious because of the topic they're studying? Because if so, we can do some work on that topic. Is it just maths in general has a negative emotional reaction? Well, then we can start to build that more positive reaction. Is it something else? So really take the moment to sit down and listen to your child about their maths. I also want to take this workshop about maths anxiety to talk specifically about exams, because we are coming to that time of year where exam is going to play a role for all of us. Obviously the GCSEs and the A levels, but we're kind of coming up to end of year exams, SATs, entry tests, depending upon the time of year. So let's talk about some things we can do to support your child with their maths exams. Build routines around their revision. So what I mean by this is you can make revision part of your daily, weekly routine. You can do this by doing revision little and often. Build it in to that daily routine. We obviously are going to do some maths revision today because we do it every day. Obviously, we're going to do some maths revision on Wednesday because we always revise some maths on Wednesday. Location. If you can, if you have the ability to, try and do that revision in the same place. What it does is it builds a routine. Well, obviously, I walk in the door on a Tuesday after school and I go to my desk where my maths book is already there with my calculator, my water, my pen. It builds that kind of routine into it because we're removing barriers to doing the practice. It's called reducing the friction to do something, although I'm sure it has a better name. So if we can reduce the barriers, the frictions to doing something, we're more likely to do it. If you think about it with going for a run, are you more likely to go for a run if your gym stuff is all laid out at the end of your bed in the morning? Or are you more likely to do it if it's hidden away in a basket and it's not clean? Well, you're more likely to do it if it's there because you're going to do it. Timings. Try and build maths revision into your daily routine by doing it at the same time. I appreciate that's really difficult at different times of the year, but what we can do is do it at the same time on certain days. So on Wednesdays, you know, you've got that half an hour before you go off to swimming practice. Why don't we do 20 minutes on this maths worksheet from Corbett Maths? We know it only takes 20 minutes, so let's go and get it done. And also build reflections into your work routines and revision. What I mean by building reflection time into your revision process with your child is when they finish their maths, encourage them to take 2 or 3 minutes to sit down and think about what they've done well in that session and what they need to keep working on. Now, at the start, you're probably going to need to do that with them. You're going to need to sit down, maybe even write down, well, what have we learned that we're good at today? What have we achieved at? What can we keep working on next time? And then that routine will develop and they'll start doing it independently. We are supporting them at the start. We're allowing them to be independent. What to practice for maths is a question I get asked all the time. And number one I always go to is don't just revise the topics you can do. It's so easy to just revise the topics that we know we can do because we want to get that sense of achievement. What we need to do is acknowledge there's stuff that we can't do yet and revise those topics. Conversely, I also say don't just revise topics that you have absolutely no idea about. This is really common. A student wants to improve their grade, so they go to the GCSE paper and they just go to the last question and they just practice that. Now, if you're aiming to improve from a grade 5 to a grade 6, that last grade 9 question is not the question that is going to get you up a grade. That is not the stuff to revise, the stuff that you haven't done at all in class, the stuff that your teacher has said you don't need to cover yet for whatever reason. Revise the stuff that you're kind of meh on. I know how to try and do the question. I've got my notes on it. I know where I can go to, but I need to improve on that question. Something like factorization, where the coefficient of x squared is not 1. We will know what this means if we just type that into Google, for example. You'll be able to do the core skill, like the grade 5, 6 skill of just factorizing quadratics. But to move on, you need to factorize where there's like 3x squared. Now, that's something we can make the jump of because you've probably done a bit of it in class, but we might need to practice it a bit more. So that's an example of something you can do a little bit of and you want to push yourself up. Next up is do practice questions. The best thing you can do to improve your maths grade is to practice exam style questions. If you're in year 11, year 13, now is not the time really to be worrying about gaining new topics. It's about getting exam questions right. And the best way to get better at exam questions is to revise exam style questions and encourage your child to use proper maths language when they're working. What I mean is when you're asking them what they're doing in maths today, don't let them just say, oh, I'm doing some algebra. Really push them to give them a really specific topic and using the proper language. The reason are A, it will focus their revision, but B, using that proper maths language will allow them to identify that language in an exam, in a test, for example. So if they're just saying, oh, I need to put stuff in brackets, that's not what the exam question stuff says. But if they're saying, I'm going to go away and factorize some stuff, they're going to recognize that word in the exam. Remember, an exam can be a high pressure environment. So we need to acknowledge that and build from that. What else can you do to support your child? Well, you can go to www.moreedu.co.uk, which is where all my stuff is, where you can get in contact with me about free consultations. I will be running revision classes for GCSE in February half term, Easter, and the week before the exam. And you can get access to all those revision classes for just a one-off cost. You can also come to me for a free consultation for one-to-one tuition. You can also go to More Edu and find out some blogs on some cognitive science approaches that was going to help your child. You can also go to that website and you'll see some of my other workshops that I've done in the past and workshops I'm going to run in the future. Also, that website is where you can sign up for all my other information to do with the other workshops I run. You can also follow me at Instagram at Helping My Child Learn. You are already part of the Facebook group, so you can watch out stuff on there. But what I really want to emphasize is what we are talking about with maths anxiety is this negative emotional reaction to maths. That's what we want to overcome. The point of this is not to overcome the actual maths processes and procedures. There's no point focusing on the nitty-gritty bits of maths if we've got this negative emotional reaction already in us in maths, which is meaning we can't even access that point. So to help your child with their maths anxiety, really think about how you can help them overcome that negative emotional reaction. You can do that by what you display, your perceptions of maths, the language you use, and by supporting them to get these bits of achievement that are going to lead to greater emotional, sorry, let me say that again. One thing you can do is support your child to get those wins in maths, those little senses of achievement that are going to help them feel motivated with their mathematics. That is going to help get rid of this negative emotional reaction with maths, and that is going to help them overcome their maths anxiety. So what we want to do to help our child overcome with their maths anxiety, the 3 things I really want you to take away from this is think about your feelings to do with maths as a parent and how you convey those feelings to your child. Think about how you can support your child with their math studies without taking away their independence to do with the maths. And think about the language you are using to help instill a positive emotional reaction with maths. Want to thank you, Time, for joining this workshop today. I'll be on the Facebook group for briefly, so if you have any questions, you can go there.